Run this like cardio.
Diamond District in the jam. Dang it. All right, hey, it's Chase with Legend Suspensions, and in this Tech Tuesday, we're gonna be talking about tri-glides, specifically the air suspension, the standard air, and the air A, how to set that suspension sag, proper spacer orientation, talking about setting that sag for solo and two-up riding, as well as making sure that you're utilizing either your gauge or how to set that sag if you don't have a gauge on your bike. That's gonna be the optimal way to set this suspension up for no matter what your weight is on the bike, to make sure that these shocks are dialed in specifically for how you're using them. So we've got a rider on the bike here, and what we're gonna do first is you'll wanna have somebody at the back of the bike, and we're just gonna start our measurement essentially from the ground to a repeatable spot. So that can be the bottom of your pipe, that can be to a body line on the bumper here, and that's what we're gonna use. And this is at exactly 11 inches. So what we went ahead and did was we've aired this system up to about 90 PSI. Now for the weight of rider that we have on here, that person doesn't squat this suspension at all. So we're starting with a fully extended shock with more pressure in it than this rider needs. And that way we're gonna get a really accurate reading when they start letting pressure out and we drop this measurement down 1 inch. We're gonna reference the PSI gauge after we've got to that 1 inch mark, and that's gonna tell us exactly what this rider is gonna need for suspension sag. Now, if you had two people on this tri-glide, essentially you would do the exact same thing, air it up, both of you get on the bike, pack the bike down with your normal gear that you would ride with, and then you're just gonna have a third person measure that distance, your starting distance, as well as 1 inch lower, and you would reference that PSI gauge again. And that's gonna show you what your solo PSI is and your two-up PSI. That way you know when you're switching between those two different setups, for one you may go to 67 PSI, and for the other one you might go to 90. So we'll show you what that looks like here and we'll walk you through it. So again, measuring just from the ground to the bottom of this body line, we've got 11 inches. Go ahead and start releasing some air. Keep going there, keep going. And right, just a pinch more. Right, a little bit more. Okay, that's perfect. So now we've started with an 11 inch measurement from where I started, and we've dropped it down to 10. And now what we're gonna do is going from 90 PSI, we're gonna just reference that PSI gauge and see what that's down to. And that's gonna tell us exactly where this rider is gonna wanna be anytime they're riding a bike solo. Now that's a good starting point. So of course, this is not gospel if you need to add a little bit more PSI to it, whether you're in particular areas where your roads are bad, or maybe you're still potentially experiencing a bottom out from time to time. You can absolutely keep adding PSI to whatever your comfort level is. This is merely a really good starting point to get you right into the ballpark of where you're gonna wanna be on your PSI for getting set up. So once you've got that sag set, it's important to note that if you don't have a gauge on your tri-glide, this exact process is how you would set that sag up, except there's one little trick that you can use if you don't have a gauge to reference the PSI change that you started with and where you ended up. So what you'd want to do is once you've got this sag set ideally for you, you can actually adjust your mirrors so that you can see perfectly behind you. And that way, if you have too much air or not enough, your mirrors are going to be off and that's going to tell you that an adjustment needs to be made on your air suspension. You can simply cruise down the road, air up or down, or just doing it in your driveway until you can see perfectly behind you, and that's going to get you into the wheelhouse as well. That's about the easiest way I know of that you could possibly set the sag without a gauge. We do recommend getting one just because for that repeatability of setup, it makes it really, really easy to know where you started and know that repeatable spot every time. The next thing we're going to talk about is something that is kind of hard to show you on a Tri-Glide because you've obviously got a trunk on here, but that is going to be making sure that they're mounted correctly and that you've got the correct spacer orientation. So we're going to put a picture up here and it's going to show you per the install guide exactly how those spacers go. And it's very important to make sure that when this air shock is mounted up, that you can actually twist that air shock and rotate it on the spherical bearings. That's going to get rid of any suspension bind that you may get. There's a couple of factory components that will need to be removed during that install process, and that's going to ensure that these shocks get to function and move correctly after you've set the suspension sag. The next most important thing that we want to talk about is a two-part deal. If you have a standard air shock, that standard air shock is not going to have a rebound adjuster dial on it. So once you've set this air suspension sag for solo or two-up, you're done. You're ready to rock and roll. You're ready to go ride the bike. You're always on setting 3, and that's going to kind of work optimally for every scenario. You can, of course, add and remove a little bit of air pressure to your preference. But if you have that A model, and again, this is another one that's a little bit difficult to show you, but down here underneath the bike, you're gonna actually be able to access your rebound adjuster dials, and those are gonna have 1 through 6. And again, we'll cut to a little picture here of what that looks like underneath the bike. But the numbers that you can see closest to the ground are the settings that you're on. Now these shocks are going to work independently of each other, so each one of those shocks is going to need its own dial adjustment. It's important to make sure that you put both of those dials on the same setting as well to make sure that those shocks are rebounding at the exact same speed. So utilizing this kit with a gauge is a matter of airing it up, setting that sag, whether you're solo 2-up, with or without a tour pack, with or without a trailer, and referencing those PSI changes in the system so that you know exactly where to set that to when you're cruising down the road or what kind of ballpark range you're looking to be in, and you can fine tune adjustments from there. And again, without the gauge, you just want to get this system loaded down the way that you would have it when you're normally riding down the road. Have somebody measure before you take off on your trip. Drop you down about 1 inch, adjust those mirrors, whether you're solo or 2-up, and that's gonna put this in a really good sweet spot where you can fine tune it as you go down the road and air up and down to exactly what you want. And that mirror adjustment's gonna always get you into a real close ballpark. And that basically wraps up the air suspension sag setting. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email. We're happy to answer those questions for you. A dealership can also help you set this sag as well. Only takes a second, maybe a neighbor, somebody can come out and measure that for you and help you get that initial sag so that you know where you need to be in the future. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow us for some more awesome content that we're going to be putting out on these Tri-Glide models. We've got some videos coming up that we're excited with you to share. And be a legend, and we'll see you next time on the Tech Tuesday. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. It puts the lotion on the skin. All right, I'm putting it on. Where's my Auto Trader? Ooh, August, I haven't seen this one yet. Competition orange. Oh my God, it's got a Hemi. Oh, dash mat for a 71 Challenger. Because snakes and sparklers are the only ones that I like. It's not what you like, it's the consumer. Well, snakes and sparklers are the only ones that I like. You're gonna stand there owning a fireworks stand. Tell me that you don't have any screaming memes, no whistling bungholes, and church burners, hoosker do's, hoosker don'ts, with or without the scooter stick. Zippity doo-dahs. Don't you ruin this for us, Brandon. God, it's hot as balls back here.